This will give you some great context for it if you haven't seen it. If you have seen it, this will give you a lot of the story behind it. So, Jared, thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Jesus, what a great introduction, my friend. You're a absolute pro, and thank you for doing this. And I have to say, man, you got a voice for radio.
Yeah, thank you, man.
I almost
thanks.
said a face for radio.
Yeah, exactly. No, this is, I love Clubhouse because none of us has to prepare, and we don't even have to. We don't have to look at each other. We can just connect with our voice. It's a great social sort of media platform for those of us who like to live in the realm of thought and ideas and depth and long form content. So we're really going to dive deep into this process. Before we get started, I should mention that Jared was recently nominated for a Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor Motion Picture for this role. We just found out today, I think, that the film, if this is correct, was shortlisted for an Oscar for Best Hair and Makeup. And also, the Golden Globes, I believe, air tomorrow on NBC. So you can have a full day of watching great stuff tomorrow. So first,
I think someone just told me as well the room's about to close out. I think it's at just about 5,000. So.
Great. So if we're closing out at 5,000, you can create an auxiliary room by holding your phone up to another phone, and just someone can be cool and do that for those who weren't as sharp as you 4 minutes in. This has to be a record. So let's start at the beginning of the little things. And I'm sure I know for a fact you receive countless scripts. You meet with many, many directors. You take on very few roles. So what made this script and this role interesting to you?
Well, that's a great question. And I just want to say thanks to everybody who's here and listening. And, I was kind of early days involved with Clubhouse, and it's incredible to see what everyone has done and what everyone's built. The community is just, I just can't believe what's happened here. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I remember you showing it to me when there were just a couple rooms on there, and people were literally just discussing Clubhouse and what is this going to be, and to watch it grow like this, it's amazing. You've popped in a lot of rooms, but this is the first time you've actually ever, I believe, been a speaker or led a discussion.
Officially, yeah, with a kind of pointed topic. Yeah, in the early days, there were so few people here. Everyone just basically joined the same room. But it's really a phenomenon, and it's fun to be a part of it. But we're also going to take some questions from people if whoever's sticking around towards the end. If people want to ask questions, we'll be opening it up and taking some questions a little later. If anyone has a question they want to ask. I know the biggest question that everybody wants to know, as we should have titled the room, did Albert Sparma do it? Come and find out.
I did have a question about that. But we also want to not get this away for anyone who hasn't seen it. But since you brought it up, and then we'll go back to the stuff in sequence, let's ignore for the fact whether or not he did it. Did you have in your mind, as you were playing the role, the idea, a conclusion about one or the other?
Absolutely. You can't really. Okay, let me focus a little bit here. You have to have clarity when you do these things. And I went to John Lee Hancock after reading the script and deciding to do the film, and I said, we've got a big decision to make here. Because you can't play it both ways. If he did do it, you need to have an understanding of why he was in certain places, how he had certain information, and if he didn't do it, the same, vice versa. So we created a logic board. The director, John Lee Hancock, who also did a film called The Founder, which I recommend everyone watch. It's Michael Keaton, and it's the story of McDonald's of all things, but it's quite an interesting film, and I thought John Lee Hancock did just a beautiful job directing that, and Michael Keaton's incredible in that movie. And when I watched that film, I actually reached out to the director, and we met, and then a year later or so, he sent me this project. But just to kind of wrap up that one point is that, yeah, you have to commit. You have to understand the circumstances. You got to make a decision. It's a pretty big decision. Did you kill the people or not? So you got to really, understand anything and everything about who you're playing. But I think, just to back up for a second to the beginning, I originally said no to the project. I didn't think it was the right thing. I really didn't want to kind of live in that dark space, to be honest. I felt like I kind of had my fair share of darker roles, and I really wasn't interested in playing a suspect or a potential villain. So I kind of politely declined initially, and as the project kind of came together, and Denzel Washington came on board, Rami Malek, and I had a few more conversations with John Lee Hancock, and I said, well, I don't know if I could lean into the transformational aspects of this character, if I could really push myself to see how far I could go physically and mentally, emotionally, and to create something that wasn't a two-dimensional kind of baddie or potential bad guy. I'd be game, but I really want to go for it. And he was just excited to do that and embrace that. And that was kind of the beginning.
Yeah, it's interesting because in preparing for this, I watched a little bit of, again, of Lonely Hearts, where you play like a very different type of killer. And then Chapter 27, where you play Mark David Chapman. And, even the Joker's a form of, obviously, a psychopath. So you've taken on these different roles, but side by side, they're very, very different. And so what made you feel that you could do this role differently than ones you played in the past that were psychopaths or possible murderers?
I think because I had seen films like Silence of the Lambs, the original, and the original film in that trilogy, Manhunter. There had been some performances early on that were quite elevated, that raised the bar of what you could do with these sorts of roles. Just quite stunning performances. The two of those in each in Manhunter and in Silence of the Lambs, they both had two suspects or villains. And I don't know, I just, as I leaned into it a bit, I just thought that there could be an opportunity to do something that I hadn't done before. And, I know you probably think about this a lot, with your work when you're writing. You don't want to write the same book twice. You want to walk down a different path. You want to learn new things. You want to challenge yourself. You want to share new things with your audience. And that's exactly what I try to do as an artist, both with music and my acting. I try to push myself. I absolutely demand of myself that I go somewhere new. And, I remember at the beginning of this film, I promised myself that I would be as brave and act with abandon. Be as brave as possible and to act with abandon. And that's what I tried to do.
Yeah, it's really true. It's a really great point for kind of people listening who are artists or in any kind of creative or career endeavor, that if it's not interesting to you, it's not going to be interesting to anyone else. And if you're not challenging yourself, you're not growing. And I love what you just said. It's so key to the creative process. And I'm curious, when you said brave was an interesting choice of words, what would you say might have been a decision or a moment that felt brave or risky?
Do you think people are shocked we're not talking about Bitcoin or NFTs or whatever?
I thought this was the Bitcoin room. No.
Maybe we could change the title of the room to "Shoot Your Shot," I guess, right now.
Yeah.
And open it up to the audience. No, bravery. It's a big thing, and it's every time you take a new role or a new project, you need to take great risk and you need to fail. And I failed more than anybody I know. Failures are like a huge part of the process for me, and I certainly failed a lot in this film. Thank God for editing, because I think, when you're really kind of stepping out there, and you're not afraid to fall flat on your face. Or I guess you can be afraid to fall flat on your face, but when you just accept that that's inevitable and embrace it, then once in a while some things happen that surprise you, or that that work. And it's a fun place to be when you embrace those things. But this was a incredibly physical transformation. It was, from the I have this meditation that I listen to all the time, and the guy's always saying, from the tip of the toes to the top of the head. And this transformation was like from the tip of the toes to the top of the head. It was a wild one.
And so good. I want to get into that. I want to, and because we have a little more time to sort of stretch out here on Clubhouse, I'm going to start with just the beginning of your preparation process, and then we'll get into the physical, which is, so the first question is, you find out about the role, you decide to take it on. How far out from the first day of shooting do you actually start preparing?
I only had a couple of weeks to prep.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I think just over 2.5 weeks or something like that. Yeah, and we had, I wore a prosthetic nose, I had different teeth, brown eyes, I had some other prosthetics. We tried on I was on the kind of search for the holy grail of wigs, looking for the worst wig in all of Hollywood, and I just ended up not being able to find it. But I have some great ones. I should change my avatar to one of the worst wigs that we found. It was.
Do you have the blonde? I remember there was a blonde one that looked really creepy.
Yeah. I think if I wore that, it probably may have gone too far, but it was a fun one for sure. But, we. There was a lot of trial and error in a really short amount of time, and I wanted to kind of push myself physically to go to a new place. So there was a different way of walking, a different way of talking, and a lot to learn in a short amount of time. But I think the pressure was a really good thing. We all just dove in and had a great hair and makeup team, and we just tried to. We had a lot of fun with it. Actually, it's not always fun making movies. It can be quite. There's a lot of pressure because you try to do a lot in a little bit of time, and so it can be quite stressful in a unique way. But I mean, certainly there are harder things to do in the world, but it has its own specific amount of, or type of pressure, I should say. A lot of performance anxiety can come into play.
And perform, which is interesting to hear you say, as someone who's been acting your whole life. What did you get, say, performance anxiety about in this specifically?
I always just get performance anxiety around being absolutely fucking dog shit. I think that you're gonna fail. There's sometimes it's just not gonna work. So I've historically had and also acting is quite kind of a fucking mysterious, weird thing. So it's not like, okay, you're gonna build a table. It's, you can use 3 legs if you're clever, but use 4 if, that'll probably work. And, there's a way to do things, and then a design comes into play. Like, acting is kind of an elusive craft. There's not really there's not a particularly simple or obvious way to that works for everyone. Everyone seems to kind of find a unique path to get to where they need to go. So that can be a little anxiety producing, especially in the beginning. I mean, I heard Michael Douglas, I think, say that I would 20 years ago, I think I read him saying it takes 10 years just to get comfortable on the set. And I think he's kind of right. I mean, some people are just born that way. But I certainly wasn't, and it still takes me some time to get comfortable, especially when you're going to be working with Denzel Washington, who's just arguably one of the greatest actors of all time.
Yeah, and I'm curious, but it's really true what you're saying. A lot of people really don't sort of appreciate and understand that people who've been doing film and music for a long time. Johnny Cash got stage fright up till the end of his life. I've been on tour with the Strokes, who would just vomit before going on stage out of fear. It happens when you go out there and you do it. And I'm curious though, when you're on set, is the fear of being judged by the people on set, by the director, or being not up to par on the finished product?
For me, if the fear would come from, um, just my own kind of doubts and insecurities. But, the more prepared I am, the less fear I have. Put it that way.
Great.
You know,
And let's
yeah.
dive into the. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, no, no. I'm just saying fear is like actually a great motivator. Fear can be a beautiful thing. Fear keeps you from, doing a lot of really stupid things, and also can encourage you to do some of the best things you've done before. So fear is not always a bad thing. But it's not fun to always to go through that. And on this movie in particular, I was working with Denzel Washington and Rami Malek, and we all knew that it was a chance to kind of get in the ring with one another. And there was a really intense but very supportive atmosphere on the set. And I remember when I first saw him on set, when he first walked across the room, and he's just such a powerful presence. He's got that unmistakable voice, and his mannerisms are just incredibly unique. So that was awesome to have in front of me. But at that point, I was so deep in it. Um, that kind of, I would call it less fear or anxiety, more just kind of nervous excitement. Like when you're at the top of a roller coaster and it's about to go down. I know some people hate roller coasters, but I happen to love them. And, that moment is like terrifying, but also just like the best moment ever.
It's amazing. And for those of you who are joining us, I see some late people coming in the room. We're talking with Jared Leto about his, I'd say, hypnotic, like it literally is hypnotic to watch him on a screen in this portrayal of Albert Sparma in the psychological drama The Little Things, directed by John Lee Hancock, which is streaming today, and tomorrow is the last day at HBO Max, so make sure to see it if you haven't yet. A role for which he was nominated for a Golden Globe Award, which will be broadcast on NBC tomorrow. And we're talking about the preparation process, the on-set experience. You've touched on a ton of things I want to follow up on, but let's start with something you mentioned about the physical transformation, the way of walking. How you decided that way of walking, what that showed, why you made that decision.
Yeah, I just thought that Albert, in his own world, felt, he took up a lot of space, and he felt like the world was his in a way. He's a guy who never really fit in. He lived in the darker corners of the universe, and but the way that he walked, I just felt like it was really important to kind of give him a distinct way of behaving, of moving, and that's what came out. I actually kind of, I think I took it from Kim Jong Un. I mean, maybe his dad too, but he has a way of walking that he has that kind of absolute authority, and I just felt like Albert Sparma had something in him, this self confidence, even though he's a guy that never really he doesn't even have a friend in the world. But I felt like the way he walked across the room was incredibly important. And it was fun to commit to that. And I'm kind of blown away that people even talk about it. But to me, it was just part of who he was. That and potato skins.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you talked about sort of the references from like the serial killer lore, but there was something that I felt was also like Andy Kaufman-esque about him, in the sense that he's maybe doing a bit or playing there's a comedic thing to him, but the joke is really only with himself and no one else is in on it. And I don't know if that was a intentional piece or thought behind the character, if there are influences outside of that world.
No, I mean, it wasn't. I just thought that he used humor to maybe keep people off balance, and he's the type of guy who just says whatever the fuck he wants to say, whatever he's thinking, he says, and that's a really kind of a fun thing to be able to do, just to say, like, to take off the veil and have no filter, and just to say whatever wild or crazy thing comes to mind. It's not often that you have the opportunity to do that as an actor, because you got a script. And with this one, John Lee Hancock was so great because he wrote the script as well, and he was the director. He could kind of say, well, just just go for it, and encourage me to go off the rails a bit. And it was good for the scenes, and I think all of us, all of the actors as well, because Albert was constantly surprising people. I would surprise myself as well.